I know many of you, most of you, but I am Jody Petazzoni. I am an Associate Vice Provost, and I oversee the Office of Assessment, Accreditation, and Academic Program Planning. And this presentation is on substantive change, which relates largely to academic program changes, but it's connected directly to the university's accreditation. So this little cartoon from Homer says, can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things? I present that because you're going to walk away and you're going to be presented with a situation where you think to yourself, Jody might have said something about this. This might be something that I'm supposed to talk to Jody about. And that's great. All I want you to know is just call me. Don't worry about the details. Don't worry about going back to your notes. Don't worry about digging into a policy. If something comes up where you think to yourself, Jody might need to know about this, or I don't know if Jody needs to know about this, just call me. So if you don't take a note today, but merely just listen and absorb, that's perfectly fine. What I'm going to talk to you about today is SACCOC, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, is our accrediting body, and the substantive change policy that we have to comply with comes from them. But it originates with the U.S. Department of Education for the most part. So a lot of the things that SACCOC has to track, and therefore we have to track, originate with the Department of Education. It's not optional, it's not voluntary, it is something that the DOE says, look, if you want your students to be eligible for federal financial aid, you need to be doing these things. You need to know these things, you need to track these things, you need to communicate these things. And that's what we're doing, and that's why we hold these workshops, to make sure that you all, because you are the ones actually activating these changes, you know the information. We in our office will track it through curriculum changes, hopefully, but sometimes things happen outside of the realm of official changes that we really do need to know about, and those are the things that I need to make sure that you're alert to. I'm going to talk to you about what a substantive change is and what our obligations are. We'll lay the groundwork for some of the types of substantive changes, but I'm going to tell you that the document is 80 pages. We're not going to go into all of them. We're not going to talk about the details, but keep me informed, and I'll let you know if something on those 80 pages is relevant to what you're doing. We're going to help you, I hope, be able to identify some substantive changes, and then as we always have done in the past, we're going to bring you up to date on some UNC system changes, procedural for the most part, that also may impact you. So I said substantive change comes from SACCOC, our accrediting body, and this is the definition that they present to us. A substantive change is a significant modification or expansion of the nature and scope of an accredited institution. And what they're talking about here is something that extends your mission statement or extends your resources. And that becomes really important when we're talking about new programs that might seem to fit into what we're doing already, but SACCOC and the Department of Education look at it and say, you're pushing the boundaries of what you might be capable of handling, and so we need some more information, and we need you as an institution to confirm that you are prepared to handle that new activity that you're doing. And what's really important here, this bottom note, is that substantive change applies to all credentials. In the state of North Carolina and in the UNC system, there is much less focus on tracking certificates, whether they're postmasters, post-baccalaureate, or pre-baccalaureate. The system, the UNC system, doesn't care much about them. We merely load them into a file and submit them, and they say, great, you're doing this certificate now, congratulations. The Department of Education and our accrediting bodies say otherwise. They say those are credentials that we look at in exactly the same way as we do a degree. So if you are thinking about a certificate at any level, and I'm talking about a 9-credit certificate, a 12-credit certificate, you have to think about the rules that we need to follow in exactly the same way as you would for a 36 credit hour master's or 120 credit hour undergraduate program. Okay? Credential is a credential is a credential. Okay, so the reason that we hold these sessions annually is because SACCOC doesn't normally sit still and let grass grow underneath their their feet. They like to do revisions to the substantive change policies, whether they think it's because they're aligning better with what the Department of Education is delivering or whether they think they're making things easier on us. They're always doing changes. So there was a major revision in 2020 that we brought to you last year, and they had smaller revisions in 2021 and even this year in 2022 that we're going to share with you. Most of those were procedural, but you need to be aware of them. And it might be familiar to you for those of you who got notification about distance education programs that now are 50% or more online. That was in relation to a procedural change that happened. So I'll try and make those connections for you. As a response to the SAC-COC changes, we updated our policy, of course. So there is a version for the UNCG substantive change policy that was revised in 2021. As part of our responsibility and obligations to SAC-COC, the university has to have its own substantive change policy that essentially states we will follow SAC-COC to the letter of the law. Both of the policies can be found on our webpage at assessment.uncg.edu, and if you follow the SAC-COC documentation, you'll find it. If you're ever really tired at night, this might be one way to fall asleep, but my advice to you is to just call me. I'll also introduce Kate Humphreys, who's in the back of the room. If you all don't know Kate, Kate helps track substantive changes. She is the person who notifies you when you seem to be doing some program activity that might fall under the substantive change umbrella. So Kate Humphreys' name might become familiar to you. So please know Kate. So these are the policy revision highlights for SAC-COC. Number one is, as I mentioned, all mode of delivery changes now have to be sent to SAC-COC as notifications. And I'll talk about the word notification as opposed to the word approval in a minute too. When we went through the audit of our distance education offerings for courses and we calculated that 50%, we did it because of this requirement. We needed to know if there were programs that had passed over that line of 50% offerings for credit hours after the policy was put into place. So starting in December of 2020. That's why we did the audit. And if your program crossed that line, that benchmark, after this revision to the substantive change policy, we had to notify SAC-COC. So we had to send a letter that said, this BA program is now 50% or more online. And I'll talk to you about what that means in terms of notification versus approval. Number two is if we're adding new off-campus instructional sites, they're doing an extensive review that often requires an on-site visit. So it used to be we proposed opening a site and they read our description of what was happening and they approved or rejected. Now they're saying we're essentially doing an on-campus site. If you're going to open up a place that isn't part of your main campus, we're probably going to send a team to visit it and make sure that it meets all of the expectations. That is, if any of you have ever gone through an accreditation review, it's a pretty onerous venture. You host a team and it takes time and it takes money and it takes a lot of energy. So we're going to think very carefully about opening new sites, but if we do that, we're going to get through this. And then if we open up a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th off-campus site, we won't have to go through a similar review. But they're going to make sure that the first 3 that we add since the change to this policy are going to meet expectations. And they're going to know after 3 whether we understand the requirements of hosting an off-campus site. In case you're not aware, the nanoscience building campus is an off-campus site for us. We consider it main campus. SAC-COC does not. The Union Square nursing building is an off-campus site for us. And we also have an off-campus site up in Brown Summit. We call it the North Gateway campus. We host one program there, an MSA program, so we have 3 off-campus sites right now. But those were all open before this policy change.
So you're saying that
Please.
Only the first 3?
New off-campus sites will go through this extensive
But
review.
since those were before this, it doesn't count.
That's exactly it. And that's why when we did the audit of programs that passed the 50%, we didn't send them a list of every program that we have that passes 50%. We sent them the 2 that passed that line after the policy became effective. And they were very clear about that. You don't have to go back and catch up on your history. You have to just meet the policy expectations moving forward. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Number 3 is an item that we have had wrestled with them. New content, they have very clearly said, is 50% of the credits for a new program or more. In the past, their guidance had been 25%, maybe not, kind of depends on the content. And institutions had really struggled with that, and we were one who didn't quite know what to do with that. And now they've been very explicit. I'll take a moment to mention to you, new content means that we are delivering something that we have not delivered in any way, shape, or form before. So new content could be something as clear as engineering. We've never had an engineering program. We're now going to offer engineering. That's a substantive change. It could also be that we are offering, let's say, a program in, I don't know, esports. And the courses that are being packaged into that have connections to other content that we have taught, but it has an esports angle to it. If we can justify that those new courses are not, in fact, new content for UNC Greensboro, but existed in a different representation in the past, we don't have to submit it as a substantive change. And what we do in that case, if you have any colleagues who've ever gone through this, is we create a table of the old course, the new course, and the similarities. And we document that. And we do that for every new course that's being added. So that if SAC-COC were to come to us and say, this program, what's this? That looks like something different for your institution. We can pull out our justification and say, we've got it. This is why we decided not to change you to send you that substantive change. Okay? So we do all of the hard work on the front end so that we don't run into any trouble in the back. And number 3, new content does in fact require approval. And again, we'll talk about notification versus approval. They've changed the timeline for consideration by their board. They consider approval items only in June and December. It used to be rolling, but they've looked to some efficiencies. And then this is one, competency-based or prior learning assessment programs are now substantive changes that need to be approved. Competency-based and prior learning programs is different from awarding credit for competencies or prior learning. The word program is essential to this, okay, versus courses. Okay. So I need to talk about the words notify versus approval here for a minute. Notifying SAC-COC of something means that we're telling them it happened, we're sending them that letter, that formal written description, and then we're going on with our lives. We're not stopping for anything. We've met our obligation by mailing it to SAC-COC. SAC-COC mails us back a letter that says, thanks for the notification. Approvals, which are things that include true substantive changes like new programs, like new off-campus sites, actually require that we submit a prospectus that goes into significant detail in how we support faculty, how we support students, how the site, if it's a site, or how the online learning, if it's technology, is supported appropriately by the infrastructure. We go into details about budgets, we go into details about admitting students and moving students through a program and all that sort of thing. That kind of fully developed prospectus requires approval. We cannot offer a program until SAC-COC sends us back a letter that says, you have been approved to do this thing that you have proposed. Until we have that letter in hand, we cannot admit a student. What we can do is market the program with the statement pending SAC-COC approval. In that way, we can let students know that it's coming, we can market it, we can start recruiting, but we cannot admit one student until the letter is in hand. Okay, so that's the difference between notification. Notification means we don't have to wait anything. It's a low-level kind of revision that we're doing. Approval means SAC-COC needs to give us its blessing to go forth and institute that change. Okay, and we can get into significant trouble if we do anything without that letter. And we also are required to have a policy and procedure, which I've mentioned that we do have. To make you aware of how substantive change work is altering here at UNC Greensboro, We had 8 substantive changes in 1920, and we had 15 2 years later. So we're doing a lot more work. Part of it is because SAC-COC wants to know some things, but a big part is because we're making a lot of changes. Note on the bottom, when we get a substantive change approved by SAC-COC, you have to implement it within 2 years, or you have to go through the substantive change process again. And I mentioned that because some people like to plan things far in the future, but you have to know that you've got that timeline, you've got that timer on to implement a change that you're actually putting in place. Our most common substantive changes here at UNCG are offering a new mode of delivery, which I mentioned, doing a lot more online learning. Sometimes we have a distance education program that's actually moving to face-to-face, and that also is a substantive change. So I'm going from a non-traditional to a traditional, or from a main campus to an off-campus site, are new modes of deliveries. Closing a program is a huge one. Yes, Ina?
Just a curious question. So it sounds like we are notifying SACs of additions. Do we have to notify them when we move programs?
That's the closing. So that's the second way. If we are ending a program completely, we are no longer going to offer that master's program anymore. That's a substantive change. If we are ending an off-campus site, we're no longer offering that program at that site. It's a substantive change. If we're ending a mode of delivery, we used to have a face-to-face version of this program along with an online version. We're no longer going to admit face-to-face students. We're only going to offer it online. That's a closure. That's a substantive change. And that's a big part of what we have done in terms of substantive changes in the recent past. For those of you who are in the College of Arts and Sciences, we had secondary education programs for like political science, sociology, those kinds of areas. Many of those programs were majors under the UNC System Office, but had low enrollment. And what we did was end the major, which was a substantive change, but activate a concentration under the existing political science, sociology, whatever it is major. But that's a substantive change. And what SAC-COC wants to know with closures, have some more information about this, but I'll stop and say this now. They want to know that students are taken care of. You admitted those students and you promised them that they could have that program. How are you going to make sure that they leave your institution with that degree? And there are a variety of ways to do that. We can substitute classes. We can continue to offer classes until the last student leaves. We can allow them to take classes at another institution. But they want to know, how are you taking care of your students? You made them a promise to take care of them. They also want to know, how are you taking care of faculty? So the faculty that were teaching courses in that program, what happens to them now? How does their workload change? How does their employment status change? They want to know that faculty are being taken care of. And then the third thing they want to know is about communication. How are you telling people this? Did you just end it? Or did you actually send out, have conversations, invite students to a conversation, invite faculty to a conversation, engage them in the decision-making process? How have you communicated? So SAC-COC, in this substantive change process related to closures, which are called teach-out plans, we have to present them with a teach-out plan. They want to know you're taking care of people and you're taking care of this program. So that's what a teach-out plan, and that's what closing a program, an off-campus site or mode of delivery is all about. And then initiating a new program that's a significant departure from existing programs. One of the more interesting ventures that we had here was when we started a PhD in business administration. We'd offered an MBA for 30 years, and we thought to ourselves, this isn't a substantive change. It's a graduate program. We're just going to be doing dissertations along with, but using the same faculty. It's going to be fine. And SAC-COC said, no, 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 no. We want to make sure that you've got people who are ready to guide research. We want to know that those doctoral students, if you admit them, are actually going to be qualified to be practicing doctorally educated people. So we had to do a substantive change, a full prospectus on the PhD in business administration to demonstrate to them that it wasn't just an MBA plus a dissertation, that we were doing more and serving those students. So we work a lot with the Substantive Change Office down at SAC COC to have conversations. We don't jump into things and do a lot of work that we don't have to do. We make sure that the way that we're moving ahead is the way that SAC COC would want us to, and we work very closely with the people who are doing the proposals to make sure that what we're putting together is going to get us what we need, which is approval by SAC COC. Yes, sir.
Is a minor fit in something like this?
A minor is not a credential. Thank you for asking that question. A minor is not a credential. The student cannot graduate from this institution with a minor. And that's why we do a lot of work with minors to kind of get us moving in the direction of offering a concentration or even a major or maybe a certificate. So we introduce a lot of work at the minor level and get us affiliated and situated with that. Yep. So just a reminder, significant departure is something different, not always really different, but different than what UNCG has already been approved to do. And we're coming up for our reaffirmation in 2024. The interesting thing is there's almost like a reset button when you go through that reaffirmation. Once they say to us, yeah, you guys are reaffirmed, you're good with your accreditation, we can then use that as a new starting point to think about what our boundaries look like and what our limitations are and what might be significantly different for us. Okay, so this is the big thing. 50% of a program's content is what is going to direct us into conversations with SAC COC. However, if you have 25 to 49% of your content as new, we have to notify SAC COC. And as I mentioned, that means sending them a letter. But this means that we will have a lot of conversations with you if you are proposing a new program about what exists and what is truly new for your program. Because we may be sending a letter even if we're not doing a substantive change. But you should know that the percentage, that 25 or 50% is based on the total program credits for a graduate program or the total credits minus general education for an undergraduate program. So one of the things with distance education is students can take electives using online credits, and those electives, because we know students can take all of their electives online, that becomes part of the calculation. And that was something that was a little bit challenging for people to realize, is that we can't set those elective aside. Those have to be part of the calculation when we're looking at the percentage of the program that students can earn through distance education. So we use this, and again, this is something that was brand new from SAC COC. They had been kind of gray or wishy-washy about it in the past. They are firmly set now. This is how you calculate it. So if you are adding 16 new credits to a 30 credit master's program, the content is brand new, we have a substantive change. Okay. Absolutely, Maura.
So how does this relate to a concentration? Say, for example,
Yeah.
we remove the ancient language requirement from the concentration,
Yep.
which is 12 credit hours.
Yeah.
Is that a substantive change?
So we'd have to look at it specifically, but SAC COC says to us, we don't care about your language on your campus in terms of majors and concentrations and pathways and that sort of thing, tracks. Whatever you may use, that language doesn't matter to us. We use the word educational program, and whether you call it a major versus a concentration versus anything else, an education program is part of this conversation. Concentrations are educational programs. So it absolutely comes into it. So if you're adding 12 new credits or you're changing 12 new credits, we'd want to do that calculation and look at what it means for these totals. So even if you're thinking about something, let Kate or I know, and we can do that detail work for you and let you know what we think it's going to look like. Because it can impact decisions. You could go from changing 24 credits to go to changing 21 credits, and it makes a difference for you. But we're going to work with you. So yes, educational programs include concentrations, but do not include minors. Okay, so less common examples of substantive changes, mergers and consolidations. Please let me never, ever have to go through one of these things with SAC COC. But you know that there are some other states that are going through this kind of thing, and SACSEOC sometime around like 2016 through 2018 spent most of their time in Georgia consolidating institutions for that system. Acquiring another institution, if we were ever to do that, would be a substantive change. A level change means if we decided to add an associate's degree, that would be a substantive change that required a prospectus. So, and then change of governance if you go from a board of trustees to a board of visitors, or if we were ever to be set free from the system office and just have our board of trustees. Forgive that language, I probably didn't mean what it sounded like. But those are kinds of huge substantive changes that are part of the package. And then we've got the real day-to-day business of running the institution that are also substantive changes that we have to tend to. If you haven't heard, in fall of 2023, we will start offering pre-baccalaureate certificates. We offered one pre-baccalaureate certificate a long time ago. No one ever enrolled in it and graduated. And through sort of a strange communication, it was closed around 2010, 2011. And we decided to bring them back as an opportunity for students to leave with an additional credential and maybe motivate them to continue on their path forward by creating pre-baccalaureate certificates that are packaged in existing undergraduate programs. We have a vision to allow freestanding certificates, that is certificates that will admit students who aren't here for a four-year degree, but also don't have a baccalaureate degree. So we're looking at doing that. But if you are interested in doing a pre-baccalaureate certificate, I can promise you that we will consider those for fall of 2023, even though the deadline, the curriculum deadline, is looming. We want to help you with this, and we know that a lot of people didn't have time to ramp up to this idea and are maybe now just engaging, especially now that we're being encouraged to innovate more. So if you are interested in doing this, talk to us and we'll work with you. Claudia.
Judy, a question. Would it be possible in any scenario for a student who leaves UNCG before earning his degree to take with him this certificate?
Yep, they just have to apply for the graduation, fill out the graduation form, and this is a credential that they will earn, whether they've graduated or not.
Okay, do you anticipate that affecting in any way the motivation to actually graduate?
I don't know, we'll have to take a look at that. It would be hard to know if those same students would have graduated without getting the certificate, but it's certainly something that we have to be aware of.
So we have a program that has a minor. If a program has a degree program, so if there's a minor and you add a feedback, does that eliminate the minor?
So you're asking about double dipping. Could you do one? The students should be doing one or the other. They should be doing the minor or the pre-baccalaureate certificate. But if the student's going to put on their graduation application that they're getting this minor and they're getting this certificate, I don't think that there's a way to stop them, but they could. Joy, and then Norma.
So with that, is there motivation for us to turn minors into certificates or reasons to stay away
I
from
get this question a lot, and I don't know that one is better than the other. I think that both have advantages. The pre-baccalaureate certificate advantage obviously is if you don't graduate, you can take it with you. The minor advantage is that you're heading toward that 120 credit hours. It's still included in those credits. A minor can look differently to a graduate school, a graduate program, or to an employer than a pre-baccalaureate certificate could. So I would think it's probably disciplinary based. That students come to this with different mindsets, but I think also in your discipline it might be a question of what's more helpful to the student, a minor versus a pre-baccalaureate certificate. I'll also mention too that students can move beyond their major to get pre-baccalaureate certificates. So if you're enrolled in, say, religious studies, but you see a pre-baccalaureate certificate in management that you want to take, even though it's not your major, you can still graduate with that certificate, complete those requirements. Norma?
So may I ask, for the pre-baccalaureate certificates added to a major, will that lengthen the program, the timeline, like studying, the credit hours and therefore the program, and that constitutes a substantive change that needs to be approved by SAC-COC?
So pre-baccalaureates currently have to be packaged within an existing degree program. Therefore, they won't be substantive changes because everything already exists. Where the students are just organizing these credits in a special way. So these pre-baccalaureate certificates, as they stand for fall of 2023, won't be substantive changes. When we go to the freestanding or the admission, solo admission into pre-baccalaureates, where the curriculum for that pre-bac may be a really different program than we've offered here. It might be new courses, it might be a repackaging. Then there could be an instance where students are going beyond the 120, but because of the way we've set it up to start this off, it shouldn't impact the 120 credit hours, and it will not be a substantive change. So Chuck, and then
So you said
Scott and Donna.
I guess it's for Lynn, it's already set up in Kim, it'll be done, okay.
We have a couple items, we have two that are already getting through.
Okay.
Yep, it's ready. And if you need any help with Kim, let us know. Oh, let me get Scott first and then Donna.
So 2 quick questions. Do these need to be assessed?
If they are contained within the major, there's not a separate assessment. When we go to freestanding, where they have completely separate SLOs, then an existing program, yes.
And do these need approval or notification?
Yep. It's a credential, so it will go through the curriculum review process.
But SAT's approval?
Because the way we're putting them together now is they are embedded within an existing program, no.
Thank you.
Donna.
So we have archaeology, anthropology, lots of double majors. We're thinking about some kind of certificate program
Sure.
specifically set aside for cultural resource management. Is that problematic? Like, could a certificate program be embedded in multiple majors? Or do the students get to count the same class for the major?
What we have seen proposed in one certificate is that elective courses are making up part of the certificate. So the certificate might be 4 courses, and it has to be a minimum of 12 credit hours. So it might be 4 courses. 2 of them might be clearly stated as requirements in the major, but then the other 2 might come from either electives or suggested classes. Take one of these. So you could manage it that way.
Okay.
I have no idea. I'm going to go with Dina, and then I'll go around the room. Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry.
So, just to make sure I'm clear, so given the fact that a student in history could come into the grind and get a feedback, if the courses in my feedback have requirements that have prereqs, then how would that work? So it would only have to work if there are no prereqs, which means more like all electives.
Yeah, well, no, there are a lot of programs that don't have a lot of prereqs involved in their courses, but if you were going to put together a pre-baccalaureate certificate that had prereqs, you might want to think about what that means for the 12 credits. My concern would be clear communication to the students. These are the 4 courses you have to complete for this certificate, but there are prereqs in order to get into this, because the certificate might be a more advanced set of courses than the prerequisites would represent. But one thing that you could consider too is stacking certificates. So you could have sort of like a beginner's certificate that included the prerequisites and then a more advanced certificate. So the student doesn't leave with just one pre-bac, they leave with 2 pre-bacs, one that shows that they have beginner level learning and another that shows they have advanced level learning in a particular area. And that might address both the prerequisites and the advanced courses. Just a thought. Yes.
So this is one more question along the same lines, and we're still not totally clear about this sort of double dipping.
Yes.
So if you're doing a major, so I'm partnered in economics. If you're doing a major in econ,
Yep.
and we put together a pre-bac, You can definitely count the pre-bac toward the major.
Yep,
Right, that's correct.
yep.
But if you're doing a minor, it's different, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that a student could declare they could graduate with the minor and the pre-baccalaureate certificate as graduation statuses currently stand. So they could declare both and get both.
Well, that's simpler for us, I think, but I see that some people might have questions.
Yeah.
And then, I guess that's it for now.
Okay, Scott had a question.
Is there an upcoming slide on post-baccalaureate certificates? Or
There's not. Feel free to ask questions now.
would it be different?
We've always had post-baccalaureate certificates, and we have a way to admit students through the graduate school separately. So you can come here for just a post-baccalaureate certificate. The one that jumps into my mind immediately is dietetics, right? So you can earn a certificate only at the graduate level or post-baccalaureate level. All of those courses are graduate courses. They're 600 level or above. I guess some would have 500 level courses. But we know how to admit students into those. We know how to graduate students from those without any instances. The part we have to work on for the pre-bac is how to get these students admitted to UNCG. We have to figure out the financial aid situation because if you don't know what gainful employment is, students can only get federal financial aid for undergraduate credits that are connected to gainful employment in some way, shape, or form. This curriculum, this program, will lead them in some way to enhanced employment opportunities. So we have to do an attestation to that, and that's the only way that students become eligible for financial aid for a freestanding certificate, but it's different for graduate students.
Sorry to add to this.
It's all right.
Do you know if the campus provost is envisioning this sort of thing in context of Project Kitty Hawk?
Haven't talked to her about it in the context of Project Kitty Hawk. I had heard that there was a very short list of programs that are all bachelor's level that are being considered now for that. So I haven't heard certificates in relation to that. But I would imagine that if the programs that are available through Kitty Hawk include an embedded certificate, the student could certainly earn both of those. Claudia?
I just wanted to know if there are other UNC campuses doing this, if we can see any models.
Yeah.
Or samples, and if the minimum is something that people tend to go to or build something bigger.
Yep. NC State has been doing pre-baccalaureate certificates for a very long time, so they have a lot of them. They have a very different inventory of programs than we do, but you might see how they structure them and how they market them or communicate them to their students. That would be helpful. I think Charlotte might also do some. That might be another resource to look at. What we are seeing, and as Lynn mentioned, we've only seen a couple of these. Lynn, they've both been 12 credits, haven't they? The ones that have come through. So I think people are kind of leaning toward the 12 credits. And I haven't heard of anyone who's thinking about stacking pre-baccalaureate certificates, but it is absolutely an opportunity that's available to you. So if you can package different sets of courses together into curricula that provide a mastery in some sort of set of skills or knowledge, you can absolutely have more than one pre-baccalaureate certificate in one undergraduate program. And again, these are available to students outside your major as well. Anne?
So, if you had two pre-bacs,
Yep.
and let's say for us, it might be that both of them included, let's say, intro stats. Make it for both.
We wouldn't double count them, so we'd want them to have separate requirements. Yep. Joy? Yeah.
Okay. Is there some information in Kim also about what's required? So if I'm looking and talking to a department, so we can see what's required for this piece that's outside of Kim, because you know, it can be difficult to go in to see what's required.
Yeah.
Do you have some information about what's required to submit for a pre-bac?
I can help you with that.
Okay.
But Joy, it's a full program.
So
I mean,
so
you're
filling
doing
it out like
everything.
this.
You're filling it out like it's a new program.
So, but you were saying before that it's part of a major already, and the learning, so can you use the same learning outcome?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
have to create anything.
Yep,
It's
no,
just a
so-
matter of entering it in.
Exactly. So it could be a subset of the program learning outcomes, where your program might have 5, it might be 1. You might have a pre-bac that has 1 learning outcome. This is the significant thing that the students are going to learn. But they can come from the major in which it's embedded.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you keep mentioning about later on, if it's a standalone outside of?
Yes.
Are we gonna be required to do that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, absolutely
So we
not.
can keep, so at a certain point, there's gonna be 2 different types.
Yes.
One that's gonna be part of, one that
Yes.
can be separate. Okay.
And that's what we have at the graduate level. So there are graduate certificates that are embedded within graduate programs, and then there are freestanding graduate certificates. So.
And last
they will
question,
exist.
sorry,
Yep.
last question. In regards to being able for a student to declare a certificate.
Yep.
Can they do it after they've completed it? So let's say they're going for the minor and they realize, ooh, I want the certificate.
They'll actually apply for it at the time of graduation.
Oh, okay.
And that's where they'll indicate it.
Okay.
But of course, if they want it to be tracked on their degree works, they'll need to declare it so the degree works knows to look at it.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Norma?
Yes, just to double check on the approval timeline, the timeline
Yeah.
for the pre-bac certificates. Go through the curriculum review, which happens twice. Can you
No. For those of you who haven't been through the curriculum review process, the curriculum committees, undergraduate and graduate, we have 2, depending on what level you're seeking, meet throughout the year. There is a deadline for the coming academic year of, it's the first week of December. Everything has to be, theoretically, everything has to be through all of the curriculum committees. We back that up with a deadline of October 31st for things to get to the university level curriculum committee. I cannot stress this enough. If you're not going to hit that deadline because you started something through the process and it's not working through your department quick enough or through your unit quick enough, reach out to us. If you have a situation where you've had a brilliant idea and this idea really needs to be in place for the coming academic year, talk to us. We will work with everybody on campus to see what we can do. The reason that we have these deadlines is because we've got students who register for the fall starting in February. That's when advising starts. That's when scheduling starts. Students have to know what courses are going to be out there. Students are going to have to know what courses are going to need prerequisites. That deadline is to help students, help you get your schedule set up, help students get registered and ready for the following fall. The other reason that we do this is we've got to publish a catalog. And we've got to be able to publish all of the requirements for students so that they know what's expected of them to actually get their diploma when they leave. That being said, we will work with you if something needs to get through the curriculum review process. So just holler and say, we need some help with this, all right? So this point, it's really right about this time of the year when everything's hitting the curriculum committees in order to be in place for fall of 2023.
And once it goes through the curriculum review process, and then there is a notification to SAC-CSE?
Depending, if any notifications have to go externally, whether it's to the UNC system office or to SAC-CSE, it would happen only after the curriculum committee approved it. If you have been told you might have a substantive change that requires a prospectus that has to be approved through SAC-CSE, we try to get you moving on that early so that you can work on that as the rest of your program is working through the system so that you're not then having to write what can be like a 25-page document quickly to get it submitted. But with SAC-CSE, I mentioned, they only consider things in June and in December, which means if we wanted anything for fall of 2023 to be approved and it requires SAC-CSE approval, it has to be to them by January 1st. So we've got really tough deadlines that come to us from SAC-CSE. But if you've got a program that's heading down that path, we're going to share that with you. Kate will construct a draft timeline for you so that you can see hopefully how things would move through the system. We haven't gotten to talking about the UNC system office right now, but I have to tell you, their deadlines, or what we used to know as their deadlines and their processes, has changed significantly. It used to be that we would work with one person at the system office, and when we got their approval, things could move forward. They have moved to a committee structure now, so all of our requests have to get on a committee agenda at the system office, not even for the Board of Governors. At the system office, their leadership team gets together and discuss them. So we have deadlines just to get on those agendas. And it has thrown off what we used to know as timeline for approvals, and we're trying to figure it out again. But I think my caution to you is don't go into this assuming that everything's just going to click along on all cylinders and things are going to move smoothly, because our experience has not been that recently. They have different needs and expectations, and we're adapting to them. And we're trying to get settled in a place where we understand them and can help you understand them. But we're not quite there yet.
And I have my final question.
Okay.
So at what point will this baccalaureate information be posted on the catalog, the university catalog, after it's approved by the curriculum review? At what point?
Yeah. So things only get into the catalog after the curriculum committees say yes to them. And it's at that point where the registrar's office would then turn to the department and say, okay, let's get your text settled. We think we understand your curriculum. We've got it set up. We need for you to review it. Here's your text. Make sure it's good. And it's at that point where for fall of 2023 or whenever the academic year is that it's been appropriate for or approved for, would it show up in the catalog. Mara?
You might have already talked about this when you talked about financial aid, but could we advertise, if we came up with a certificate program, could we advertise it at Guilford Tech, Guilford College, High Point University? I mean, is there anything to stop a student from applying to take a class at UNCG from one of those places to get a certificate?
For pre-bacs?
Yeah.
They have to be enrolled as a four-year degree-seeking student.
They do. Okay,
at this moment.
Okay.
We're moving in that direction. We're doing what you're talking about, advertising and having students take a smaller set of courses here and leave with just a certificate will happen.
Okay.
I'd love to see it for fall of 2024, but I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Okay.
Okay, this is great. Hopefully the questions have been helpful. Roberto?
Quick on these certificates, interesting at the very least. What kind of scrutiny do you think they're going to get at the system level with respect to duplication? Because they're right now cracking down on duplication.
The way that certificates are submitted to the UNC system office is that there is no review. We do not submit it as a program proposal, but it gets added to our inventory when one student enrolls. So there's something called the Student Data Mart, and that is the file that, or the data sharing that happens between our institution and the system office that they then use to understand enrollment. It's how they know what our head count is and what our FTE is and what our faculty FTE is and all of that sort of thing. Student Data Mart, Faculty Data, Human Resources Data Mart, and Finance Data Mart are the three data marts. Certificates merely get added to that file, sent to the UNC system office, and when the system reads a certificate that it didn't have in its inventory before, it adds it to the inventory. There is no conversation about duplication. There is no scrutiny of anything else. So the certificates are one area in which the onus is on us to make sure that everything looks square in terms of SIP codes, in terms of titles, in terms of enrollment, in terms of credit hours, and all of those sorts of things. But there is currently no scrutiny of certificates. So my little caveat to that is things change at the UNC system office all the time. I am about to finish my 13th year here at UNCG. When I got here, nobody talked about SIP codes.
Oh, wow.
No, if you had a SIP code on your program and it was outlandish, you were a geography degree and you had a public health SIP code, nobody batted an eye. SIP codes, as you all know, are now the currency of the land, right? So I say that to say, at this moment, certificates and duplication thereof across institutions is not part of the conversation, but that absolutely could change. So I think we just need to be aware of it and move forward, knowing that that's out there. Did you have one more?
Yeah, so when you do curriculum or course revisions, and if we don't recognize something as being a substantive change,
Yes.
then you will tell us
We will. Yeah, so Kate and I have conversations. Anytime you propose a new program in Kim, this is the cool thing for me about having an automated system. When a new program shows up in Kim, the system automatically sends me an email and says, Jody, someone's doing something new, go look at it. And I go look at it. And Kate will go look at it. And we'll have a conversation. We will always ask you to fill out a substantive change checklist. It is how we track that we've asked the question, is this possibly a substantive change? There are a set of questions, criteria really contained in that checklist, and if you meet certain criteria, we're going to have an additional conversation with you, and we're going to meet with you. We're not going to immediately say this is a substantive change. We might say, this looks like a substantive change. Can you tell us some more about this? Because if I'm being honest, I don't want to do a prospectus. I really don't. They're a lot of work, and it's a lot of time. The time it delays you to get your program active can be really difficult for us. But we have to meet our obligation with SACS-COC. So my question's going to be, what exactly are you doing here? Are we really talking about a substantive change, or are we talking about something that really is a different version, a different packaging of what we're doing here already? And it's really funny when you ask the question of people, is this new? Depending on where they're coming from, sometimes people want you to know everything's new. This is brand new, it's great, which can be a problem sometimes. And then other people are like, nope, nothing new, nothing to see here. It's very standard, very typical of what we've been doing. So we will always come to you and say, tell us about this, and we have to get the answer right. If it's a substantive change, we have to do it right with SACS-COC. SACS-COC also tells us, though, we don't want extra paperwork. Don't send us a substantive change if it's not a substantive change. It slows us down from helping other institutions that really have substantive changes. So again, we work with SACS-COC to do what we have to do, and hopefully not more than that. Okay?
And just, I know you said it maybe like 3 times.
It's fine.
This right here, how we're doing it now, is not considered a substantive.
It is not a substantive change because it's embedded in an existing program. Yep. There's literally nothing new that we're doing with these. Awesome. Okay. So this happens. I get stuck on a slide for a while and the system goes to sleep. And then there we go. Okay. Just make sure. Okay. Adding online delivery to programs. I know I've mentioned this before, but the 50% calculation is based on delivery methods of the courses that can count towards the program, even if the course is only offered online once. So we had a lot of departments that offered a course once during the summer because it was convenient for the instructor, or because the university directed that all courses would be taught online that semester. If it's taught online once, it counts in the calculation. And the reason for that is, again, SACS-COC is worried about the students. They want to know, if a student can complete your degree mostly online, do you have the infrastructure to support them? They're concerned that a student, mostly at institutions that haven't offered one online program, but an institution that offers new online programs, has to be able to support every student and every faculty member teaching in that program. And that's why they include all of the courses, even those that have been offered once. People have said to me, how do I get that course off the list? The only way to get the course off the list is for time to pass with you not offering it online. So if 7 or 8 years pass and you haven't offered it online, then we can take that course out of the count because a student couldn't use it to piece together an online program. And SACS-COC will tell you, it's not about whether they do, it's about whether they could. You've got to be prepared for the student who could piece it together, okay? So this is what a notification to SACS-COC looks like. It is very low level. We just send a letter. We do not have to wait for SACS-COC to respond. I wanted to take a minute to talk about closures. As I mentioned, closing programs is one of the big activities that we do. closing a program receives the same level of scrutiny that opening a program would. As I mentioned, they're very concerned about whether we're taking care of students. Are we allowing them to complete the degree? Are we taking care of the faculty? So know that the scrutiny is essential. What we've pictured here is a teach-out plan. These are all of the detailed questions that we have to respond to SAC-COC with, and so we need for you to help us understand them. SAC-COC defines closure as closed to admission or entry. We have programs that will stop admitting students in order to revise a curriculum. We're not going to close that program, but if you have no way to allow a student to move through a program because you've lost a crucial faculty member or multiple crucial faculty members, or there is an experience that the students have to complete that you absolutely cannot deliver to them at this time, and we have to stop admitting or entering students until we get the situation fixed, we're going to close that program. But I want you to know that if we close a program and you bring it back, you start admitting students or want to start admitting students, we can reopen a closed program with SAC-COC by sending them a letter. Okay?
Just a notification in that case?
They don't call it a notification. We send a letter letting them know that we want to reopen it, and they say, we've added it back to your inventory. So it's different from a notification. The closure letter is different from a notification. I will mention that if you've closed just a concentration, we haven't told the UNC system office. There's no action with the UNC system when we close a concentration. If you close a major and want to bring it back, we had to close that major with the UNC system office, and we had to close it with SAC-COC. Recently, the UNC system office changed their processes to align with SAC-COC, which was nice. So now if you want to reopen a major within 5 years, the UNC system office will do it with a letter. Theoretically, we haven't tested it yet, but that's what we've been told. Yeah, Karen.
So during the pandemic, other institutions, not UNCG, had graduate programs where they said, we're not going to admit any students this year.
Yep.
Does that require the same, like a 1-year pause does not require that same kind of notification?
No, because that was a situation where they knew they were going to reopen it again. SAC-COC says as soon as you have decided not to admit students, you have to let us know. So please, as soon as you've made that decision, talk to my office so that we can get things moving. And again, we'll have conversations about whether you're actually closing a program versus just pausing admission to it for a single year. And again, this is about the treatment of students. So I can't emphasize that enough. Again, closing degrees, majors, concentrations in some instances, certificates and the standalone concentrations. Modes of delivery, sites, all of these things are closures for SAC-COC, so work with us. We had a program send an email to its students and say, hey, we're not going to be able to offer this program anymore, so please find a different major.
Oh dear.
Like so bad, there aren't even words for how bad that was. So when it came to my attention, we had to reverse everything that had just happened and communicate to the students that you are here, you came here for that degree, and we're going to make sure that you leave with that degree, or we're going to help you find a different degree if that's your choice. But we had an obligation to those students. So please let your faculty know. We can't close a program by just emailing students. So this, I commented last week, this slide used to be much earlier in the presentation. Years have kind of salved my wounds, and I now put it toward the end just so that you know if we aren't compliant with the SAC-COC substantive change policy, there are consequences. We could be put on monitoring, which is what happened to UNCG in 2010. We had opened up a program at an off-campus site and not told SAC-COC. Therefore, every federal aid dollar that was awarded to those students had to be returned to the federal government because it was an unapproved site, an unapproved program at an unapproved site. So we returned $54,000, and those students graduated with their diplomas. Thank you very much, because that was our bad. So monitoring is bad. We can be put on sanctions if we seem to have a systemic or repeated problem. We can lose our SACS-COC membership, but as I mentioned, financial aid reimbursement had to go back to the U.S. Department of Education and the federal government. So please, 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 the reason we get together every year is so that you can help us, help you, and help the institution make sure that we're tending to this obligation that we have. So what can you do? Please, just by attending. You're now aware of the substantive change policy. I often have people leave, I always have somebody leave this session and contact me later and say, I think we did something bad. And I want you to know, if you think you did something bad, it's okay. We just need to fix it as soon as possible, okay? So just know that. We're going to fix it. Scott. You don't have to confess now, Scott.
This policy is only on your website, not on the Provost website?
It's not on the Provost website. Yep. The UNCG substantive change policy is on the university-wide policy site. It is a university-wide policy. So you'll find it on the chancellor's university policy sites. But the SACS-COC version is only on my webpage. Read our policy. Again, it's restating SACS-COC, but it's an abbreviated version. And what it says to you is there's a lot of stuff you might decide to do that you need to have a conversation with me about, okay? Be alert as you're hearing your colleagues talk about things, as you're proposing things, as you're having conversations about what could we do, what should we do. Keep in mind that there may be potential substantive changes involved, and reach out to my office. In my office, we don't want to say no. What we want to say is yes, and here are the things that you have to do to make that happen. In very rare cases when we have to say no, it's firmly rooted in a policy problem. For example, if you came to me and said we'd like to offer associate's degrees next year, I'm going to say no. Yes, we can maybe do it for 2024, 2025, but we've got some work to do, and let's get going, okay? The substantive change checklist I've mentioned a couple of times. Make sure you fill it out. That's how we know that we have reviewed any possible substantive changes. And you get in writing a response to us that says this is what you need to do internally at UNCG, externally for the UNC System Office, and externally for SACS-COC. But please contact our office if you have any questions, and please do contact us before you actually make any changes. And again, if you've realized you didn't report something, contact me as soon as possible. Since I have you here, I wanted to mention that we have had some discrepancies with how people have published the university's accreditation status. If you are going to describe UNCG's accreditation with SACS-COC, you have to publish both of these paragraphs in total verbatim. If you want to put it in an abbreviated marketing piece, my advice to you is to just link to our website, which is where this is posted, and people can find our accreditation status. When you try and replicate it, you become probably misaligned as things change based on information we receive from SACS-COC. So I think it's just better, since we have the resource available, to just link to it. If you find that you have to publish it, let me know, and we'll work with you. I had mentioned earlier, we are preparing for our reaffirmation. This happens every 10 years. Something that is good about this 10-year review is that 2 years ago, SACS-COC put in place what they call a differentiated review, or an abbreviated set of standards that people can respond to. And this is for institutions that have had a history, a practice of good practices in accreditation, and we're in good standing, and our leadership hasn't changed recently. Therefore, instead of responding to 74 standards, we're responding to 40, which is a much smaller project, and which is great for us. It speaks volumes about where we stand in terms of demonstrating compliance for SACS-COC. What it does mean is 10 years from now, or in 2034, we will have to go through the full review and answer to all of the standards, and I just feel so bad for whoever's going to be in charge of that in 2034. But for us, it's good right now. The report is due in September of 2023, so we may be asking you for some actions. You guys know I handle assessment too. If you hear from me and say I need for you to do something for me related to your assessment report, please respond. Our on-site committee visit happens March 18th through 21st. It's already scheduled. Those are the days that they will be here on campus. They will visit our off-campus sites. They will be here on the main campus, and you may be asked to participate in some interviews, depending on the things that they want to follow up on. So I hope I can count on you to be there if we need you to. And a reminder for those of you who weren't here for the 2014 Quality Enhancement Plan, every institution does need to do a QEP. Our QEP topic is on holistic wellness. So you should start seeing activity related to holistic wellness in the coming months. The chairs are Regina McCoy and Jill Bevel. And it's a pretty extensive group of people. We've got almost 30 people who are on that planning committee, and we're looking at the 9 components or 9 elements of holistic wellness. So there should be more information about how you can engage with that and what direction the university will be moving in. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Any questions at this point? I've got some UNC system information to share. Okay, really great questions that you all have asked. There are new degree forms, delivery mode forms, discontinuation forms that have to be completed. They are delivered to us from the UNC system office. We can't change them. We have to submit them as they are. Each one of these has a different timeline, and as I mentioned to you, we're trying to figure out the new timelines. We're trying to work with the UNC system and see how their meeting patterns are impacting our timeline. We will help you move things through the system as smoothly as we possibly can, but get in touch with us if you're thinking about a new major. When we say new degree program, we're talking about a new major. We're not talking about a concentration. Concentrations can be added to majors without going through these. But a new major would have to go on the Board of Governors, and before you even start filling out these forms for the system office and the Board of Governors, we've got to make sure that the university identifies it as a priority. So there's a priority list of programs that you first have to get yourself on. New modes also have a delivery of form that has to be completed. I think we have a slide about the financial worksheet, which is what I wanted to talk to you about very briefly. When you are proposing a new degree plan, of course, you have to go through a budget exercise and describe how you're going to support it. I see you, Chuck, 1 second. When you are moving to a mode of delivery, we were told a few months ago that a financial worksheet that explains the existing program expenses as compared to the new program delivery expenses had to be communicated. And what they want to see is this new mode of delivery or is this new program going to cost the institution money, allow the institution to break even, or is it going to actually make the university money? And they want to see in fairly stark terms exactly where the dollars sit, and that's what these worksheets are based on. We learned at the start of September that they don't always want a financial worksheet when you're changing delivery modes. The trick is they don't quite know what criteria they're going to use to determine when they want the worksheet. So Kate and I met with 2 of our colleagues at the system office and pleaded with them for a list of criteria. That will make it easier for them to know when they need a worksheet, and it will make it easier for us to know when we need a worksheet, because what we've found is when they want one of these, they don't give you long to complete it, and it's a bit of an effort to complete them. These are not easily done. So Kate and I put together a detailed set of instructions that literally goes line by line, line 1, line 2, line 3, telling you exactly how to fill it out. We hope the instructions are helpful. For some programs, when it's looked like it's probably going to be a program that the system office is going to know about, we've advised them to start working on the worksheet, and we'll help them through the process so that when the system office says get it to us by Thursday, we're more prepared to meet that deadline. But for other programs, we've said just sit and wait, and we'll see what comes back from the system office. Chuck, what was your question?
Back to your previous.
Yeah.
So, so It's not very clear, can you do the preliminary authorization and the request to establish at the same time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And programs take different approaches with this. There are actually 3 steps to getting a new degree program. Number 1 is get it on the university's priority list. That means that the provost and the chancellors think that this new major is a good addition to our inventory. So there's that. The next step is a form called the request for preliminary authorization. And it is a shortened version of the second step, which is the full planning document. But it sets the stage for why the institution should have this new program. You don't have to go into the curriculum, but you have to give them a sense of how many credits it's going to be, what the demand is from students, what the demand is from the state for people with this type of degree. And there's a lot of information in the preliminary authorization that also fits in the request to establish. And sometimes it makes sense to develop them together. So instead of turning that part of your brain off and going back to it 3 or 4 months later, after the UNC System Office has approved it, it makes sense to develop them together and work on both of those documents. Now, in terms of the curriculum process, you could decide to submit only the preliminary authorization to the curriculum committees, wait until that all gets through, see how they respond to it, and then go and adjust a request to establish that you might have been working on and submit that later, or you can submit them together. And then the curriculum committee has both of those documents to think about together, and any questions that they have will come back to you, and you have the opportunity to make adjustments to those documents, those forms, before we send them to the system office. We've had people take both approaches. I don't know that one works. I would say some people like working in one way and some people like working in the other way. It doesn't impact how soon we can get a document to the system office. We cannot submit the request to establish until the system office has approved the preliminary authorization. So you have to submit them separately. You cannot submit them together to the UNC system office. So you can't shorten that window by getting them to them together.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Donna.
If we received an email telling us that we now have a distance education program because all the electives
Yes.
now, do we need to fill out the
Nope.
form?
Nope. That was, so the difference between SAC-COC and the UNC system office is SAC-COC says the Department of Education wants us to know at all times what your list of programs that look certain ways is. And we have to have that list of programs that pass 50% where students are going to need support and faculty are going to need support on distance education programs. The UNC system office says we don't want to know about it unless you're going to market and advertise and enroll and admit students in that mode. If it was an unintentional thing where you pass the 50%, but you're not going to tell students you have an online program, there's no action to take with the UNC system office. They don't want to know about it. Yep. Okay. So the UNC system online delivery, this is what we were just talking about. Only programs intentionally offered as online, and wanting to market and enroll students really has to go through the approval. Keep moving. Timeline for the Board of Governors. We had been working on a theory that they were reviewing programs, thank you for coming, twice a year. They're telling us they're now going to go to a 4 to 5 year review process. So instead of considering new programs at every Board of Governors meeting, they'll do one a quarter, and then they'll probably add a July urgent review meeting. So if people are coming up on the fall and they have to have this program in place and it hasn't passed through the review process yet, they'll hold an emergency meeting in July. We're waiting for the official notice on that, and we'll share it with you as soon as we get it. But it doesn't change the fact that materials have to be to the Board of Governors 6 weeks in advance if you want to be on the agenda. So there's still a timeline. This is, Kate showed us the draft that we give to you all to try and help you understand what the timeline might be for proposing a new program, but we always caveat it with, to the best of our knowledge, if everything moves smoothly, this is what it looks like. But again, we have experienced unique or new delays for us that we hadn't anticipated. And all we can do is adjust. So one of the other things that the UNC System Office has told us is if you are requesting a SIP code from a non-STEM SIP code to a STEM SIP code for a program, not for a course, for a program. Going from non-STEM to STEM, there are additional questions that you now have to answer, and this is related to funding based on SIP codes. So if you want to go non-STEM to STEM, you now have to fill out additional questions. You've got to write your justification, but then you have to complete the curriculum. You've got to propose or present the entire curriculum with descriptions, course descriptions that explain the STEM content and the SIP codes that are associated with each of those courses. And then you've got to do research to list similar programs in the UNC system to explain where they stand. And then they often want to have some information nationally. Are you aligning with what these programs look like nationally? And then the course level mapping. That includes the course number, the course title, the current course SIP. If you're changing the course SIP, because you're not always changing the SIP code, then you've got the new proposed one, the number of credits earned in the course, and then you've got to again describe the non-STEM and the STEM content. So they are looking more at a more detailed level at these kinds of requests. They used to just read the description in the SIP documentation and see if it made sense, and now they want content associated with it. One last FYI, if you haven't heard, the UNC System Office is doing a return on investment research project. They have contracted with Deloitte, RPK Group, and Burning Glass to look at each of our programs based on the return on investment to the student, the return on investment to the state, and the cost to deliver that program to the institution. They're using numbers from the student data mart files, students, human resources, and financial to look at it, but I think it's worthwhile for you all to know that this is going on. We expect to see data in the spring. That the consultants have been adamant that they are not contextualizing the data, that it is up to us to put the story and the context with the data, but this is what the Board of Governors is going to get. Donna.
I just want to warn everybody in here that you should request the careers they have listed, the career code, because it can be quite limited and upsetting. Because if they're going to say, well, your degree creates these jobs, and the jobs are like 5 jobs, and you know that your students are going into multiple jobs, we need to make noise about it now.
Yeah.
I think so. I just want to warn everybody to ask for that information.
There's a lot of context that's going to have to go into it. There are a lot of programs that prepare students very well for jobs outside of the state. And that is a component of the analysis. If your students aren't staying in the state, that matters. And I think my concern is that they haven't shared the algorithms for how each of these criteria are folding into the overall value for return on investment or the cost to the institution. So I think that the institutions are going to have a lot of work to do once these numbers even come through. Yes.
So the analysis is eventually going to be shared with us, and then we will, we're not providing anything up front. We're going to get what someone else categorizes our program as, and we get to like back that all on.
Yeah, and this is the thing, I'm the university's liaison to this project. It's all been one-way communication. So they've worked with us only when they can't get to the data that they need, and they need us to run data in a different way. But they didn't share with us what the criteria were going to be, or what the data were going to be, or what the fields were going to be that they were going to take from our data. So there's going to be a lot of work on the back end to contextualize this and put a story to it.
And also, may I add?
Yeah.
So this also might be that perhaps other, like the Career and Professional Development Office may be part of this. I need to find out how We are showcasing to our students what programs are STEM or what they can do with those programs and how to reach out to prospective employers.
Well, our audience is the Board of Governors and the state legislature. So the North Carolina General Assembly is the one that commissioned this.
That's right,
So,
but
yes.
it's what we are providing the areas within the university that will be informing what information goes to the Board of Governors. I don't know what I'm saying, but there are different.
They haven't told us.
No, yet.
They haven't told us how we're going to be allowed to contextualize
And I
it.
want to add one more point, if I may, please. Work at International Program Center, and I just want to share with this wonderful audience. My name is Norma Velasquez. The importance of STEM programs for our international students. They are calling us here at the office saying, okay, I'm calling from Nepal, whatever nation, and I'm interested in UNCG because you have a STEM program in computer science. Those are hot fields right now. So the STEM designation is crucial for our international students. The U.S. government has also created new ways by which students can change status from non-immigrant to immigrant just because they're in STEM field. This new administration has made it easier for our wonderful students and non-immigrants to become immigrants just because of their STEM field. So the STEM fields are so very crucial in so many levels. I just want to make sure you're aware of this as you are looking at the SIP and how crucial they are. That's all.
So if you have any questions about curriculum proposals, you need any help, we talked about the deadlines. Lynn, Kate, and Ian Draves in the grad school are here to help. If you have any concerns about Kim, if you have any concerns about programs, I literally shepherded a course through the entire approval process yesterday because it was urgent for students in a particular program. We're going to help you. Shout out to Lynn, shout out to Kate, call on Ian. We will get done what needs to get done for your students. The deadline, as I mentioned, is October 31st. If you need an exception, call. Okay? Okay. So that's me, that's Kate. Lynn is here too. If you don't know Lynn, you should. Any other questions? So grateful for you all for coming. Thank you. Have a great day. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm new for the HHSBS program.
Yeah.
Do we still have to wait for SACs?
Yeah, so we sent